So, absolute advantage. Absolute advantage means we're trading, two countries are trading, and one person or one country is better at something. Each one is better at something than the other. So let's suppose you have a friend and you're starting up a business, and your friend's really good at making cabinets, and you're really good at selling stuff. And together you're going to start up a business. All right? Should both of you make cabinets and both of you try to sell stuff? Or should the person who's really good at making cabinets make the cabinets, and the person who's not very good at making cabinets not make cabinets but go out and sell them? Well, each person should specialize in what they're good at. Okay? Each person should specialize in what they're good at. So, if you're not good with your hands, but you're really good selling stuff, making deals, go out and sell stuff and make deals. And if you're really good at making cabinets, make cabinets. That's absolute advantage. One person is better at one of the two things you're doing, and the other person or the other country is better at the other thing. So the U.S. is better at making cars than Costa Rica. Costa Rica is better at making bananas than the U.S. Both of us have an absolute advantage. We have an absolute advantage in cars and electronics and that kind of thing. They have an absolute advantage in bananas, rubber. Okay? You find what you have your advantage in. The other theory, Ricardo's theory, is what's called comparative advantage. And comparative advantage says you can still get better off by trading, even if one is better at everything than the other. So if the U.S. is better at making everything than Canada, we should still trade with Canada. And the real world example I have is, here you have, down at the bottom here, a doctor. Doctors are smart, they know what they're doing, they're usually efficient at their work, they're good with their hands. That doctor is a better doctor than the people who are doing the paperwork in their office, yes? If you go into the doctor's office and they say, hey, today you can see the doctor, or you can see this person over here who does the forms. You really want to see the doctor, right? The doctor is probably better at the forms. If the doctor sat down to do the forms, the doctor would probably actually be better at the paperwork than the people who do the paperwork. But should the doctor spend half of their day being a doctor and half of their day doing paperwork? Or should they just do the doctoring and hire somebody else to do the paperwork? And the answer is the doctor is going to make a lot more money if all day long they doctor and they hire somebody to do their paperwork for them. Okay? So even if you're better at everything, you should still specialize in what you're the best at and do that. Okay? So what we want to do now is do some simple math. It's not hard math. But we want to demonstrate that trade can make everyone better off. Okay? And we're going to start and do this with absolute advantage. Remember, this is Adam Smith's theory, and each country, we're going to do two countries here, each country is better than the other country at one of the things we're producing. Okay? So we're still going to make guns and we're still going to make roses. And one country is going to be better at guns and the other country is going to be better at roses. So let's say here in the U.S. that we can either make guns or we can make roses. And here's some examples of what we could do. So let's suppose if we make no guns, we make 1,000 roses. If we make 1,000 guns, we make 500 roses. And if we make 2,000 guns, we make 0 roses. So we have these, what are called ordered pairs. Okay? This is a straight line. Yes? I go up in guns by 1,000, I go down in roses by 500. I go up by guns in 1,000, I go down in roses by 500. It is constant opportunity cost, constant marginal cost. And the reason I'm doing it this way is so we can draw a straight line. Okay? And you get a PPF that looks like this, which is a straight line, which is constant opportunity cost. Okay? You're not going to see this in the real world, but we do this because it's going to make the math way easier for us. So we want to simplify the math, and we're doing a constant opportunity cost, a straight line PPF. Okay, exciting? All right. So let's suppose we have two countries, and we're cleverly going to call these countries us and them. And let's suppose we look at how much stuff one person can make in one day in each country. So we have Guns and Roses again. And in our country, us, and we have the best initials of all countries, if you hadn't figured that out, right? We're us. Us, one person in us, who works all day long, can make 100 guns, or that person can make 100 roses. They can't make 100 guns and 40 roses. They can make 100 guns, or they can make 40 roses. The other country is called them. One person in them can make 50 guns, or one person in them can make 100 roses. Everybody with me here? So in us, every person, we can put them to work making guns and get 100. We can put them to work making roses and get 40. Them, they can put somebody to work making guns and get 50, or they can put somebody to work making roses and get 100. We're going to assume that each country has 1,000 people. You can do this with 1 million or 1 billion or whatever you want. The trick is not to compare the 100 in the U.S. to the 40 in the U.S. The trick is to compare guns in the U.S. versus guns in them. Who's better at guns? The U.S. Right? The U.S. is twice as good at making guns as them is. But them is better at making roses. In fact, they're 2.5 times better at making roses than us. So what should we do? What should we do? So our country, us, we should just make guns. Their country should just make roses, and then we should trade. Now let's put some numbers here. So the U.S. has an absolute advantage in making guns, and them has an absolute advantage in making roses. We're better at making guns. They're better at making roses. Absolute advantage. Now, let's take us. We have 1,000 people. Let's split those 1,000 people in half and have 500 of them go to work making guns and 500 of them go to work making roses. So we take 500 people times 100 guns per person, means we can make 50,000 guns if we do that. And if we take our other 500 people and they each make 40 roses, we make 20,000 roses. So if we take our labor force and we split it up half and half making guns and half making roses, we'll end up with 50,000 guns and 20,000 roses. Okay? So that's without any trade. We call that autarky. Economy without trade is an autarky. So if we do that, we get 50,000 guns and 20,000 roses. And if we do the same thing for them, they get 25,000 guns and 50,000 roses. Hopefully you see where we're going here by now, because now we're going to specialize, right? So us has the absolute advantage in guns. They should only make guns. Them has an absolute advantage in roses. They should only make roses. So here's the world. Total world with no trade has 75,000 guns and 70,000 roses. Okay? Now let's specialize. Us now has 100,000 guns and no roses. Them has 0 guns and 100,000 roses. And guess what? We have 100,000 guns and 100,000 roses. The whole world is producing 25,000 more guns and 30,000 more roses. And how did we get that gain? We specialized. Countries picked what they're good at and specialized in what they're good at. And when we did that, we had this huge gain in production, right? We in the U.S. should not try to grow bananas, right? We should make cars and electronics and stuff. And we should buy our bananas from somebody who's good at bananas and try to sell them stuff that we're good at and they're not good at. Now, we don't really gain anything yet because we have to trade. We only have guns, they only have roses. So we could actually take our guns and go get their roses, but that would not be friendly. Okay, what we want to do is work out a trade where we send them some guns and they send us some roses. Now you're saying, how do we figure this out? And the answer is trial and error. there's thousands of different combinations of trades that would work, right? In the real world, there's negotiations going on, the price of this and the price of that, and I'll give you this much for that and that much for that, and all those negotiations that happen between all the buyers and sellers, the farmers in the U.S. negotiating to sell soybeans into China, Chinese companies negotiating to produce car parts for the U.S., all of that stuff creates this, and nobody has to say this is what it's going to be. Markets out there and individuals and businesses, and they're all figuring out all the time what they're willing to pay and coming up with what the trade should be, right? So we're coming up with what's called a terms of trade. That's how much of one we're willing to give up for the other. And you say, no, wait a second. In the real world, we wouldn't trade guns for roses. Well, the answer is, of course, even if we pay money and if we're paying $10 for a gun and $1 for a rose, well, a gun is worth 10 roses. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether we do this with money or not. And in fact, there's lots of times in the real world that a ship goes from one country to another and it's loaded with one thing. When it leaves port and gets into the country, they take that stuff off, they fill it up with other stuff, and it comes back. So there are physical trades that still occur, but even if they're not, we can still look at the prices of these things and figure out, 10 roses equals one gun. All right? Terms of trade. So let's suppose that us is going to send 40,000 guns to them, and they're going to send 30,000 roses to us. So them's going to give up 30,000 roses. Us is going to give up 40,000 guns. Okay? So us had 100,000 guns. They're shipping 48,000 of them over to them. Them has 100,000 roses. They're shipping 30,000 over of them to us. Got that? So what do we get? Us, we're producing 100,000 guns, but we're trading away, right? We're sending away 40,000. That leaves us with 60,000. And we had no roses, but them is sending these 30,000 roses into us. And so we end up with 60,000 guns and 30,000 roses when we started out with 100,000 guns. Are we better off? Are we better off? Well, we had 50,000 guns and 20,000 roses before we specialized. So we've got 10,000 more guns and 10,000 more roses. We're a lot better off than we were before, right? We're Pareto optimal. We can give everybody all the guns and roses they had before and still have more guns and roses to give other people. So we can make some people better off without making anybody worse off. And that makes this whole trade thing Pareto optimal. It's a good thing. It makes society better off. Okay? Again, we're better off, better off, better off. Okay? Them is also better off. If we do the math for them is better off. Okay? So A is where we are now. We're at this extreme point. We're making 100,000 guns and nothing else. But we're consuming at B. We're out in the unattainable. There's no way we could produce that much stuff on our own. But because we traded and cooperated and worked with somebody else, we got out to B. Okay? This is why we don't let you all work together on your tests, because your test scores would be higher if you could sit in the room and just talk with each other than if you have to sit there in the room and just take the test. Okay? There's gains from trade, and they occur all over the place. And we don't let you work with your classmates on your tests because we want you at A and not at B.